We got Shaun Maguire
We got
himself.
Shaun Maguire.
He's
Welcome
back.
to the show.
What's up, team? I didn't wear a Counter-Strike t-shirt this day. I let you down. Sorry.
Yeah, you're still looking good. It's great.
Not as good as you guys. And that whoever that lady that
and
anyone that comments on your hair is just jealous.
Yeah.
You guys are very good-looking men.
Everyone on the call has good hair. But I mean, it's been a rough week. Sequoia is only making like a few $1 billion these days off of these acquisitions. What are you going to do to turn it around after the Whiz acquisition kind of fell so short of expectations?
Yeah, it's been a tough one. 5 years after investment to pretty mega outcome.
What are you going to
do? Congratulations. Breakdown. I'd love to hear the quick highlights of meeting the team and how that investment came together, and then what you think from your view how they were able, because we talked about this yesterday, the Whiz team, the reason they were able to get such a tremendous price, or one of, I'm sure, multiple, is because they just were growing so quickly and getting so much traction that they didn't need to sell. So it's, they had infinite optionality. But how do you think they pulled this off?
So on the team, I mean, Gilly Renan and my partner Doug Leone get all the credit. They are both absolute legends. So the backstory there is, Sequoia used to have Sequoia Israel. Gilly was one of the 3 partners there. Gilly's an insanely talented guy, and he started his own fund called CyberStarts, which we seeded. And early on, meaning like Sequoia invested in his fund, which we don't do very often. And Gilly called up Doug, said, I have the next one. And, it was Asaf and the team. Doug pulled like 4 of us into a rapid fire meeting. I was in that first meeting. And I mean, to be very honest, the learning I personally got from watching Doug operate here, and like getting to see like a phone call from Gilly of I've got the next one with these crack team, to multi-billion-dollar gain 5 years later. Like, it's really hard to explain how much learning goes into that. But I think there is a lot of really interesting stuff from the beginning here. And so this is my recollection. Different people have different recollections, but basically Doug got the call, set up the meeting. 4 of us joined from Sequoia. The team it was obvious how insanely good the team was. They had sold their last company to Microsoft, and they're basically running cloud security there. And they had a very strong point of view on what the problem was. The problem was cloud security. No one had solved cloud security. They had like an extreme articulation around the problem, but they didn't really know how they were going to solve that problem at the time. And so they had a really clear insight into the wedge into the market, which was mapping that basically people don't even know what assets they have in their cloud environments. And so the first thing they're going to do is they'd figured out how to map people's assets kind of outside in. So you can tell a customer in a first meeting, this is everything you own, and therefore these are vulnerabilities. But the original idea of how to solve the problem after that wedge in was like basically a networking solution, like a zero trust networking solution. And so I wouldn't say it was a pivot, because they had identified the problem they wanted to solve, but the actual solution changed dramatically in the first few months. And so, people talk about like market versus team. This was a market and team, but I think it's interesting how like the idea changed so much in the first few months. And I think
but digging in a little bit more, you guys made the first investment, was it 2020?
It was called January, February 2020.
Okay. In 2020, was the average venture capitalist believing that no one had solved cloud security, or is that something that you had to really be in it, running it at Microsoft, to realize that it wasn't a solved problem? Because, I think the market was reacting to the news saying, wait, did they not have a coherent like cloud
they didn't
security?
Think about security at Google? Like that's why they did this deal? What was going on before?
But yeah, was it
really good question. And funny. I mean, I personally have like an extreme background in this space.
Sure.
I had started a company called Expanse, originally Cadium, a long time ago, started in 2012. And to be very candid, like we were a precursor company to Whiz, like basically directly. And we started off in an on-prem era. And so doing like the mapping of on-prem networks from the outside in, and like our primary value prop, or like our sales wedges, we would show up and we already knew people's networks and their vulnerabilities when we would show up. And so like I personally had a prepared mind, but I think very few people, there was this extreme skepticism of the cloud has been around for 15 years. Why is cloud, why now? Like, why is cloud security not solved? But I think to anyone that was like a practitioner, it was clear it was not solved at all. And I think the lesson is that, like the way I think about it, the cloud penetration was still very low in, call it 2015. If you look at like total percent of like compute in Fortune 500 companies, I don't know what it was in 2015, but it's probably like 5% or 7% or
Wow.
something. That'd be my guess. And by the time you got to 2020, it was a much bigger fraction. And so it's like, I think we had just flipped where customers and buyers in their heads, if only like 5% of your network is cloud, you care more about securing the on-prem than the cloud. And if you're a second-class citizen, like you just doesn't really get done. By 2020, cloud was like the first-class citizen. It was by far the most important thing to secure. And everyone before had us, including my own company. Like we started with an on-prem solution, then we started to bolt on a cloud solution. And our cloud solution wasn't very good because that's not how we started. And so to come in and only do cloud, that lets you have a way better product experience for the cloud. And they entered the market when it was, call it, maybe not in terms of total compute, but 40-50% of the mind share in an org had become cloud. And then they were able to grow with that as it went from there. And so it's just something can happen, like the cloud can get created, but it may not be the right time to build like the cloud security business for another 15 years. You have to wait for maturity of the market and all of that. And I think they just timed the maturity perfectly. And then the last thing is you need to solve this from the outside in. Like Microsoft can't solve this themselves. You have to have a solution that is kind of looking at all clouds and looking at the entire industry, because people are multi-cloud, they work with multiple vendors. And I think that this has to be, you have to have, Wiz like very much came with the right approach for that time.
That makes sense. Can you talk about Kella? Got announced a few days ago, I think 5 days ago. Very high profile round. I heard about it, I think last year at this point. So they're probably already getting preempted on the next one. But talk about the team there. How quickly did you know that you wanted to back them?
I mean, basically, we're killing it in Israel, or maybe it's the wrong language. We're investing very well in Israel. Anyways, so Kella, my partner David Kahn, led the investment, and I'm his wingman there. Kella's another amazing team. We have known kind of one of the two primary co-founders, Alon Dror, for quite a long time. He was an absolute legend. One of the things we've been doing in Israel is, and actually, like, let me make a bigger point about Israel. One of the things that I think is very unique about Israel right now compared to most other places, it's much easier to concentrate talent in Israel than it is as like a Stanford spinout. Let me unpack that. Like if you go back in time, basically every great company I can think of in the past has done a phenomenal job concentrating talent. If you think about Palantir, like they got all the best people out of Stanford in a few year range. If you think about Google, like they got all the best people, 10 years prior. And after the dot-com crash, they went and acqui-hired a bunch of the best teams. They brought in Jeff Dean and they scooped up a bunch of the best talent after the dot-com crash. If you think about, PayPal, obviously the PayPal mafia, like they had concentrated insane amounts of talent. SpaceX in the early days, like anyone in the world that wanted to work on rockets, like there was only one place to go, and they went to, SpaceX. And the best companies concentrate insane amounts of talent early on for a bunch of reasons. I think it's become much harder to concentrate talent spinning out of like Stanford or Harvard or wherever than it used to be. I mean, one, like, to be very blunt, one is these universities have become like, they basically lost meritocracy, and they lost, like, there's grade inflation. You don't even know where you stand relative to other kids. Harvard last year implemented their first ever remedial math because there are people coming in that don't know algebra because they dropped the admission standards. It's the truth. It's crazy. Like, they dropped the admission standards so much. And so, like, the people coming in are no longer as good. And then there's grade inflation. So you don't even know who the absolute most cracked people are. If you go back to, like, call it the 80s and onwards, for a while, Harvard had this insane math class called Math 55. Math 55 was legendary in the math community. It's like, probably 50% of the people that even finished the class went on to be math professors.
Wow.
It was something that you would basically learn like a whole undergraduate math curriculum in 1 year, so you could just do graduate classes and research after.
Is that class like YC, where if you enter into it, you're kind of doing it for 12 hours a day type of thing? Is it that intense, or is it?
It's the only thing you do when you're at Harvard, like if you're in that year. It's like Bill Gates actually did Math 55, and
Wow.
so did a bunch of the other kind of Microsoft founders. The fact that they did Math 55 and survived as like computer oriented people rather than pure math people, and that they went and started a business, that calling card let them recruit anyone from Harvard, like anyone they wanted would go work for them, just because like people knew how smart they were because of Math 55. It's like these things are actually very important as like signals to other smart people that this person's on a level above me. And so therefore, like, I should lower my ego. Like, I was not able to finish Math 55, some hypothetical person like tries Math 55, gets absolutely smoked, weeded out in the first week, and then, Bill Gates crushes it, and so they want to go work for him. We don't have that as much anymore at Stanford and Harvard, et cetera. There also just weren't as many companies getting formed back then. And so, the ones that actually did get formed, I graduated college in 2007. Facebook was the hottest company in the world kind of when I was an undergrad. And at the time, I think Zuck is probably 2 years older than me. There were basically no startups coming out of Harvard at the time. And so like everyone that was good that would consider a startup or was technically brilliant, like they would just go recruit them. Now there's like 50. And so the talent gets spread across all of them. In Israel, there is still this insane concentration of talent. And it comes from, this is my weave, this is my Trump weave coming on.
Yeah.
There's this insane concentration of talent that comes from the fact that because everyone goes into the army, there's extremely rigorous selection of people for the army. And call it, from an intellectual standpoint, there's like 60 slots for the most prestigious, best things. And there's like extremely rigorous vetting to get those slots. And so the people that go do that are already kind of selected on a totally different level than most other people. And then out of those 60 people, one or two will emerge as like the apex, alpha men or women that just do insane work and are geniuses, and everyone else wants to follow. And so when they come out of the army, they are really able to concentrate talent in a way that is basically impossible if all you've done is gone to a school that has like, if you've gone to school that has pass fail grades, and your admissions like process is basically non-meritocratic and like an essay. And so anyways, like with Kella, I mean, if you go back to Whiz, like the Whiz founding team were absolute legends, like psycho level legends in Israel, and therefore able to concentrate insane talent. In the first couple months of the company, like basically day one, they hired 20 people that were ultra elite. And it's just like when you're that good and everyone knows it, you can bring in these incredible people from day one. And Kella is of this mold as well. Like a lot of people know what VCs are now learning what talpiot is. Talpiot is kind of one of the most elite courses in Israel. It's people that have extreme aptitude in mathematics, physics, and leadership ability. And so 3 of the 4 Whiz co-founders were talpiot. Alon Dror, one of the Kella founders, was also talpiot. And so like there's the talpiot mafia, and he's especially highly regarded there. And so anyways, they've done an incredible job concentrating talent. And Alon teamed up with this woman, Hamutal Meridor, who complemented him perfectly. She'd been at Palantir for a long time and just like really understand. Obviously, when you're a defense tech company, you need 2 things. You need to build great technology, but you also need to be able to sell it. And you need to understand like government sales, government procurement. And Alon is a genius at building great technology, and Hamutal is a genius at selling it and navigating government relationships. And for what it's worth, I think both Palantir and Anduril did this unbelievably well. They kind of established this playbook.
Well, related to that, what is your take on the latest continuing resolution? It seems like there's not this massive increase to the defense budget that some, defense tech startups were hoping for. Maybe there's money that's going to shift around, but what is your advice to maybe young defense tech founders that are hunting for that first program of record, looking for some government money in the new era?
It's so crazy that we're having this conversation. Like if you would have told me 10 years ago that someone's going to say in like a live podcast, what do you say the young founder is hunting for a program of record? It's like that language, this was like you are an alien 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Look, I would say to the young founder that's hunting for a program of record, only 1 or 2 of you a year are going to do that. And it's going to be like of new companies, and it's really hard. And it takes both having great tech and great, government BD. And so don't underinvest it in either of those. And
it's interesting. It used to be extremely difficult to raise venture capital. Now it's seemingly very easy to raise venture capital, but the hard part is in this category.
And I want to hear your take on dual use. There's a theory that we were kicking around yesterday talking about, well, maybe you're better off if you're a dual use company. We talked to a satellite company, Albedo. Obviously, they do imaging of the Earth at 10 centimeter scale. That has military applications, but that also has commercial applications. So if the DoD money doesn't come quickly enough, maybe they go sell it to hedge funds and oil and gas companies. Do you think there'll be a shift in VC or defense tech VC towards, I want a little bit more of a dual use story earlier just to hedge against defense budgets?
So it's kind of crazy that you're asking me these things, because the company I started was a cybersecurity company that was basically a worse precursor to Whiz.
Sure.
Where it was dual use, and about 2/3 of our revenue was from the U.S. government, and 1/3 was enterprise. And so it's like these maximum 2 sets of overlap of the threads you're asking. I think, look, with our company, everyone told us you cannot be gov only, it has to be dual use. That's what every investor told us, every expert. And so therefore we did it because we wouldn't have been able to raise money otherwise. But I think dual use is kind of a mirage. Like it can be great, but I think I think we're entering an era where investors are okay with just government sale companies, single use. And I think you just have to do what's best for your company and what's best in any given moment. If it's natural for your company to be dual use because the product is basically the same in both, enterprise and gov, then do that. But if it's going to like really cost you on one side to do the other, then I would just not do it early on. And like with Palantir, I don't know. I was never in the building at Palantir. I don't know the story that well. But my understanding was that early on they had way more pull with the government than with enterprise, and but like they tried to do both. And anyways, I think with Foundry there were different points in time where they had way more pull with the government than with enterprise, and times where they had more pull with enterprise than with government. But I think there was pressure on them to always be doing both. And I would just say lean into wherever you're getting a lot of pull right now, but don't close the door on the other.
Yeah, it depends on the product. Like, I mean, obviously, Microsoft Teams is ITAR compliant, right? Like, is it a dual-use technology? Yes, I guess. But then
Well,
if you
Windows
have
XP
C4 on it,
or like Windows 95 is whichever ones are still certified to run. None of the, at least when I was in the DoD, like the most current operating system was from the 90s.
Yeah.
Crazy. There was allegations in a lawsuit of corporate espionage earlier this week. I don't need you to or want you to comment on that incident, but do you think that corporate espionage is a sort of potentially broader issue in Silicon Valley, something that needs to be taken more seriously, or is this just sort of like a one-off sort of crisis?
Oh man. Well, I think that Elon was right when he said the most entertaining outcome is the most likely. That's just been true
over
on
and
every
over.
level. It's like second love thermodynamics. Look, I don't have a super strong point of view on this, but I'll just say I think that nation state espionage in Silicon Valley has been much bigger scale than people have understood for at least the last decade and probably beyond that. And Delian yesterday, whenever, I think he's right. Like if you're a hardware company, just go try to compete on the merits of the hardware and obviously do what you can to like protect your
IP
and data assets and everything. But like at the end of the day, in hardware, you're going to win on the merits of the product. On the software side, I think you have to be a little bit more concerned, but it's just in hacking, there's this expression, you want to be a target of opportunity. Sorry, you want to be a target of choice, not a target of opportunity. Meaning like if some nation state says we are going to hack this company, like they can hack anyone, but you don't want to be like the slow pack animal that's just like the target of opportunity. You're the slowest gazelle on
It's taken down by the North Koreans that are just stealing your crypto or something like that.
Exactly.
I love X, the everything app.
Well,
yeah,
I'd love to give you another victory lap on X, because I think last time we came on, it was rumored that there was this new announcement. But before that, could you talk about what's your sort of takeaway from the incident with the NASA astronauts? We're very happy to have them back here on Earth with the dolphins. But is there any learnings that you think that the space industry should be taking away from that broadly, and NASA in general?
So I might have mentioned this guy before, but one of my closest friends from Caltech, his name is Casey Hanmer. He's a brilliant guy.
Brilliant.
He's a prolific blogger.
Love him.
I mean, very, very smart guy.
Yeah.
He has been saying so he worked at JPL, and he's been saying for many years that this is not what he's been saying. So I'm sorry, Casey, I'm making this more provocative than what you actually said, but he's basically said that NASA's been underestimating SpaceX, and that it's in NASA's interest to kind of understand and anticipate like just how fast the progress of SpaceX is. And what he actually said is that they're underestimating Starship, and that Starship is going to really change what's possible in the future, and that NASA has been still designing missions with the constraints of 10, 20 years ago, which is when launch costs are in the limit infinity and there's very few slots per year, then if the economic rational thing is to spend close to infinite money making sure that your satellite works the first time, because the launch cost dominates in the return math. Infinity divided by infinity or whatever. But if you have any large constant number divided by infinity is zero. So anyways, like they've had this state of mind that launch is precious, that it's infinitely expensive, there's very little of it. I think NASA needs to get in the state of mind that launch is becoming abundant. In the future, it's going to be in the limit going to zero. Like literally, if you go 20 years from now, I think that, I mean, Elon has said that the forecasts for Starship are something like $20 a kilogram or something like that. And, it
Just the
used to be
fuel costs,
100,000,
basically.
Yeah.
used to be $100,000 a kilogram. And so
Wow.
we have to get in this mentality that like SpaceX is not just Elon. SpaceX is an incredibly well-run company that has like a very diverse set of leadership and, very robust, team, and that they are bringing insane capabilities to bear that will deeply, deeply benefit NASA. And we need to intersect the future, not the present or the past.
I love it. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, we talked about the X funding last time, but I want to know about X is clearly on the warpath to becoming an everything app. We're basically running the entire show on X now. We have group DMs for how we organize the show and stuff. It's been a really robust platform for us. But I see that they're rolling out payments and all sorts of different features. There's always been this narrative that an everything app can only happen in the East.
Yeah.
It's America's
Happened
not
in
set up
China
for it.
10 years ago.
Exactly. So can you lay us out, like, what are the hurdles? What are the milestones? What are the opportunities for X to become a really fully realize the vision?
It's not my place to fully lay this out. I'll let Elon do that. He's pretty good at setting vision on things, but I think people are going to be, look, X has been underestimated the last few years, and not by you guys. Like, you guys are part of the small cohort of people that realized the 80s was a great decade, and and that America is the greatest country in the world, and that X was the place to be the last few years. But by a lot of the world has been underestimated, and I'm very optimistic about where it's going the next few years. And I'll just say, like, instead of saying the roadmap, I'll say the company has had to, since the take private, there's been like a few years of like fixing the foundation of the company.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to enter the era where like the foundation is strong and they get to now like actually build on top of this new strong foundation. And so I think we're going to see, it's like the progress has been below the ground the last 2.5 years. Totally. It's about to go above the ground where we all see it.
Yeah, a lot of the products that got built or rolled out were just things that had kind of been on the shelf and maybe were like not really launched for whatever internal political reason. Elon kind of got all those out the door, and I feel like the app's been working really well. The algorithm's been more satisfying than ever. I feel like I'm seeing really interesting content, so I've been satisfied. What you got?
One more question. Do you think M&A is really, is the Whiz acquisition, it still has to be approved from what I know, but is M&A, really back on the menu? Do you feel like, when you're talking to some of these later stage founders that are exploring, thinking about the future and saying, does an IPO make sense? Does some type of strategic acquisition make sense? How are you thinking about this personally? I'm sure your general advice is just be a great company and grow really fast and you'll have a lot of optionality, but do you have a sort of a feeling about where things are going?
Not about Whiz at all. My general kind of M&A view is I think there's two things that people are looking for. They're looking for guidance that things will actually be approved. And it's not just in America. There's also, like, for most companies, European regulatory approvals. And that has been the bottleneck for quite a few M&A deals in the last few years. So I think it's like greater clarity on the global US and Europe, but everywhere kind of regulatory approvals. And the second, I think there's still, like, when I talk to bankers or anyone in the last 6 weeks, there's a lot of macro uncertainty. Like, people are very nervous about tariffs and very nervous about, like Doge, and kind of people don't want to go do a big M&A transaction when the markets can change 20, 30%, either way quickly, because it just, you don't know exactly what you're underwriting.
This happened with Square and Afterpay or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
They
Afterpay.
bought Afterpay for like $20-30 billion, some crazy number, and then Square was worth something like that, like a year later. You know, it just was like, anyways.
Look, those are the two things. I think if we get clarity, like favorable clarity on those two things, then I think M&A will rip. But it requires both.
Well, the new head of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson, is out doing podcasts. We'll have to have him on the show. Maybe you can join and we can put the screws to him and say, let's do some deals, Andrew.
He's not coming on after that comment.
You're not coming on.
Anyways, thanks for having me, boys.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by.
Have a great weekend.
I just got to say, you guys are crushing it. Keep going.
It.
Absolutely crushing it.
Thank you for being a part of it. Good man.
Bye.